I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
And I'm JT Timmons.
And today we have a very creepy episode for you because we are going to be talking about one of the most horrific women in history, Elizabeth Bathory, the Blood Countess.
All right. Very nice.
Yeah, she, interestingly enough, she actually holds a Guinness World Record. She is known to be the most prolific serial killer in history because she killed up to 600 people.
Whoa. Yeah, she was one of the first serial killers in my encyclopedia of serial killers, mainly because her last name started with a B and it was in alpha order, but...
Well, there you go.
Yeah, she was like right behind Albert Fish.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're going to be talking about her today, but we do want to thank our patrons first. So, yes. JT, you want to read those off?
Absolutely. All right. So, I would like to thank Poober, Allison F., and Fanny Garcia. Thank y'all for joining our Patreon. And I am very, very excited to let everyone know what our kind of fan base is called, because
it's going to be named.
It's going to be named. And we've had a couple great submissions come in from our patrons. Really, all of them were excellent. But we put it to a vote through the whole team, and we decided on Parajunkies.
Yes, that's become our brand.
Hashtag ghost heroin. Oh, yeah.
Oh, God, Chris.
Yeah, Chris really...
He really did us in with that one.
Really did. And that was Poober that actually dropped that one. So thank you, Poober.
For that Parajunkie.
For the Parajunkies. Absolutely.
Love that. That's super fun.
For sure.
And another reason why you should join Patreon, so that you can vote on things like that.
For sure. And also one more announcement. I kind of mentioned it in last week's podcast, but From One to Wicked is now going to be a part of the most haunted city on earth. So it's going to be kind of like how Good Mythical Morning, how they do like games like international taste test or international dartboard game.
Yeah.
You know, that we're kind of going to do. We're going to start playing those types of games just kind of on our podcast. And From One to Wicked, we think is a great start. So
yeah, and we're still going to be voting on them between JT and I of whether they are 1 or a 0, like the Amityville horror case. If you didn't listen to that, sorry for the spoiler, but you should go back and listen.
That's actually a patron-only episode.
Oh, well, there you go. You got to go check out Patreon.
Oh, yeah.
But yes, so we're still going to vote on them. We're still going to rate them, but we're just going to do it over here instead.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to start with Elizabeth Bathory.
All right.
She was just an awful, awful beast of a woman, honestly. And I don't want to make excuses for her, but she did have a very traumatic childhood, I would say.
They all do.
Well, okay, so you know how we now know with serial killers, a lot of times they were children of abuse. They had different mental illnesses and things like that attributed to their behavioral problems turning to serial killing. You can see the parallels even in the 15th century, you know.
Okay.
Or what would that be? 1575. That's not the 15th century, is that? That's what?
Yeah.
It's definitely not the 15th century. It's 1575. Regardless, you can definitely see the parallels even back then before we had any idea about mental illness or any kind of effects on the human brain from abuse. And
well, she still mutilated
no,
people's
she's still
genitals.
An awful person. I'm just saying from a comparison standpoint, comparing serial killers from today's time to even back then, it just shows that
Sure.
it's a thing. But regardless, so let's start out with Elizabeth's history. So she was born in near Bathory, Hungary.
Is that around Bathory?
You're getting exiled from the podcast.
Exiled.
It's just gonna be me.
It's just gonna be Madison.
But yes, she was born in Hungary on August 7th, 1560. So she was a Leo.
And had an appetite. I'm full of them, y'all. Sorry.
I'm not kidding. He's gonna get exiled, y'all. Sorry. I hope you like listening to just me blabber. but at 11 years old, she was considered eligible for marriage, and she became betrothed to Count Ferenc, Ferenc, Ferenc.
Okay.
Nadesty. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. You know, Slavic names.
Yeah.
It can be a little tricky. But at 15 years old, they became married on May 8th of 1575. And they would be gifted Kocsis Castle, which is in Hungary. And that would
Okay.
be their wedding gift. So they would move in there. They would have their first child at about 10 years later, so when she was around 25 years old. And 2 of her children would die as infants, and the rest would survive. She had 5 children total, so she would end up having 2 daughters and 1 son survive. Her husband was a soldier, and so he often was out fighting the Ottoman Turks and the empire's ventures into the Balkan Europe.
Got it.
So they were very often apart. So Elizabeth definitely had to grow up very quickly, considering that she got engaged at 11 years old.
Yeah.
And then she had to, you know, keep a whole castle. She had to run a whole staff. She had to take care of children. But the interesting...
That's all, like, as a teenager? Mm-hmm. Goodness.
Well, she started having children at 25. So at least she did have that time to...
Oh, that's a gap.
Yeah, she at least had time to acclimate, I guess. But regardless, the interesting thing, though, is that her murderous and sadistic tendencies did not start until her husband came back from war one time.
Huh.
Yes. So Nadetsy had actually started to catch on to some of the Turks' more heinous forms of torture practices, and he became very fascinated by it. So he deeply studied it while he was away at war.
Okay.
But when he came back, he started to adapt the methods and practices, and he even tried to improve upon them. He got so entrenched inside of it that he was like, how can I make it even more horrible?
Wow.
Yeah. And so basically, when he came home, he brought that newfound interest to Elizabeth, who was still young and impressionable to a certain degree. And he taught Elizabeth all of the torture methods, and they became this murderous couple together because they were both so fascinated by torture.
Wow.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. So he just came home with, like, ways to torture people?
Yeah, so he studied the Turks' torture methods, basically. That was it. And he decided that he could do it better, and they did. So
Okay.
in 1602, a priest addressed a letter to the ruling courts of Transylvania discussing the unwarranted brutality exhibited by Bathory and her husband towards their servants. Unfortunately, this did not go anywhere because, you know, they were a regal family. They were kind of untouchable. Nobody really did anything about it. But the couple, yeah, it was the 1500s, y'all.
Yeah, I mean,
You
I know. I mean, she was eligible to be married at 11, so.
Yeah, morals were not there.
No.
No. So the couple's excessive bloodlust and complete disregard for human nature and rights were becoming completely inhumane at this point in 1602.
So her husband was also like
a psychopath.
So
I think he became a psychopath. Maybe it was the PTSD from being in war. I don't know, but he became a psychopath first, and he turned Elizabeth into the psychopath that she became.
Yeah, that's kind of like the Columbine killers.
Exactly.
Like, yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
It's like one was turned into a psychopath by the one who was naturally a psychopath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
the towns were starting to take notice of all of the missing women that were occurring and things like that. But in January 1604, Nadesty died, and he was quickly and dispassionately taken place of by Bathory, and she continued on with the extensive estates and also continued her heinous practices even without him.
Of course she did.
Yeah. She would continue torturing girls and women in ways of some being covered in honey and left outside for the insects to feast on. Yep.
Wait, so that's not even sexual.
Oh, it gets sexual.
No, I know. But when I think about her, when I think about Elizabeth Bathory, from what I've read, especially my little serial killer encyclopedia book, I think about her being like a sexual sadist almost only.
Yeah.
But that, like covering someone in honey and was...
Well, so here's the thing, is a lot of it was sexual for her, but a lot of it was from being vain with her beauty, because as she got older, she was very unhappy with her aging.
I see.
So she believed that certain things would help her stay young and youthful, and we'll get into that in a second. But also, a lot of it was simply she just liked watching people have horrible things happen to them.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, even if it might have given her sexual pleasure in that way, just watching somebody get eaten alive by insects.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe she was a narcissist,
Oh, definitely.
like a total freaking narcissist, where it's just like, she loves even if she doesn't even do the physical torturing and she's just watching someone suffer, it's like, I did that.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So weird flex, Elizabeth Bathory.
Absolutely. Now, that was just one of the ways that she would torture women. She would also have young women stripped naked and forced into deadly ice baths until their hearts gave out. Girls were tortured with having needles driven through their fingers, their noses, their nipples, their lips, and their sexual parts. And she would then have their sexual parts sliced off.
Yeah, I knew about that, but it's still kind of good to hear.
I know.
Oh, God.
That's not even half of it. So
I'm sure it isn't, honey.
So Bathory would also bind her victims.
Madison was over there doing research. Madison was over there doing research the other day, like preparing for this episode. She spends like hours researching and, writing and all of that stuff. And she was over there like, oh yeah, okay. And I'm like, honey, which one you doing? Hopefully it's the other one we were planning. And she's like, Elizabeth Bathory. I was like, what?
Yeah.
I'm just joking.
I did not look like that.
She was having fun.
I do find it interesting, though. Well, because it's so insane.
Yeah, she was having fun. I was just joking. I was just being crazy.
Yeah, you're making it seem like I'm over there like, oh yeah, what else are you going to cut off? Yeah. I'm like, oh, my God.
That's kind of how it was, but sure.
No, it's not. It's not. Don't make them think that.
Yeah.
I'm normal, y'all.
Yeah, and I have 8 toes. Help.
Jay, stop. Okay. Anyways, so Bathory would also bind her victims, and with the help of some of her handmaidens, she would also bite off the shoulders, breasts, and ears of her victims.
Oh, good feeling gone.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
She would eat their flesh, and sometimes she would even go as far as to cook the meat on the brazier while the victim looked on in fright. Yeah. She's a sick woman, y'all.
Wow. I mean, it makes me wonder about, we talk about the human condition a lot on this podcast, and just a shout out. I actually don't even know the guy, but this dude, he has a YouTube channel called Soft White Underbelly.
Oh, yeah.
And he does an incredible job of documenting the human condition. And as true crime enthusiasts, as Madison and I are, and, to a certain degree, that falls right into the paranormal, which we absolutely are obsessed with because we have this podcast. Soft White Underbelly channel he just talks to these people that some are just different and some are more perverse, some of his subjects, but he just does a great job of documenting the human condition and just interviewing these people about their, like, who they are. And so y'all should definitely check that out. But so that's just a little plug for him because I like him. But we watch this and it makes me think, like, if someone has just an insane amount of power and they are a narcissistic psychopath, someone like Bundy or Dahmer or any of the like crazy serial killers, if they just have no rules, how many people will they kill? And that makes me think that Elizabeth Bathory is probably the ultimate example of an unbridled, unhinged, unruled serial killer.
Mm-hmm. No, that's exactly what it is, because she didn't have rules. She was the ruler of the land. She could do whatever she wanted. And I mean, like, to a certain degree, they eventually took back the power like the town did and the justice system did. But she was able to have such a high body count because of the fact that really nobody was going to go up to her and be like, hey, Elizabeth, maybe you shouldn't be murdering and torturing these women. Yeah. Because then she'll just kill them, She could do that.
True.
So, but yes, so she would also sacrifice to pagan gods and spirit kids with the help of a town witch. Which is very odd. I hadn't ever heard about that until I really did a deep dive into Elizabeth Bathory.
Town witch.
Yeah, that's, what they call it. It's probably just somebody who practiced witchcraft at that time. And, there, in the 1500s especially, pagan groups were still very common, and it was possible that somebody was dabbling into darker sides of things because, there's a dark side to every...
Sure, you would have been the town witch, babe.
I am. I would have died in the witch trials so fast, y'all. I can't even tell you.
True.
But she also would eventually become considered a vampire in folklore because Elizabeth Bathory would bleed out her victims and shower in their blood. She preferred virgins, girls who were still pre-adolescents. And Bathory
I knew that. I remember that from my book.
Yep. And so Bathory would take them and clean them with milk, honey, and olive oil, which is very ritualistic and definitely has roots in pagan ritual. Not for sacrifice, but, like for when you're going into a cleansing ceremony that is typically the uses. So she just used it for a whole different messed up form. And then along with her staff, she would hang them by their ankles over the tub, and Elizabeth would slice their necks and let the blood dribble out in a flowing cascade over her naked body.
Interesting.
Also,
Wait. Hostel 2?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, they probably got that from...
That's where Eli Roth got it?
Probably.
Interesting. Honestly... I'm pretty sure when I first watched that like years ago that's where I feel like I got that vibe from that one scene. If y'all haven't seen Hostel 2,
you need to go watch it.
Yeah,
if you like
watch
gore.
Hostel 1 first, obviously.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, but yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, if you're a gore hound, you'll like Hostel, but
Hostel's the bomb.
But yeah, it's very similar to that scene. That's exactly how you should picture it. But a lot of people said it was because she was trying to recapture her lost youth, and she believed the blood of those young women, especially the pre-adolescent ones, would restore her youth.
I don't think she believed that at all. I think she liked bathing in their blood.
Well, there could have been some ritualistic stuff to that because she was very vain.
It's like if you're a serial killer, especially back in that time, and you have this, you're not going to go for, if you have access to the young virgins, those are the ones, those are like the cream of the crop. Those are the primo victims. And I think that's why she went. I don't believe that she was all like, oh, this is going to make me young again. I don't believe that.
She could. I'm just saying, it wasn't out of the question. And she was a very vain individual for sure. So it is possible at that time, they did all sorts of really obscene beauty rituals, that we think are crazy now, but for them, they would have been like, oh, that makes sense,
Yeah, but that's extra crazy.
Well, she was extra crazy.
I know,
so.
but I just don't. I don't believe that anything that she was like that would have been a spiritual thing for her at all. And if she did kind of portray that, she's just lying to herself.
Sure.
My opinion. All right.
Well, and it is, a somewhat speculation, so it is up for debate, I guess. But Bathory was finally formally indicted for a frightful litany of crimes in 1610. It was said that she had tortured up to 600 women and girls, and she was arrested and put to trial by her peers for the murder of not only what were considered stray women, but for those in her own court. Now, what came out during the proceedings absolutely terrified the country because people knew that something was going on, but they didn't know exactly what the details were. They didn't know what was going on in that castle for sure. The details and the evilness of her actions, not to mention the fact that it took authorities so many years to actually apprehend her, transformed into this massive political scandal, especially because of the sexual nature of the crimes too. And the scandal was later exacerbated by the Turks' media campaign against the noble houses of Europe.
Oh.
And Elizabeth Bathory...
So this is well documented.
Very.
So this happened.
Very much so, yes.
Like guaranteed.
Yes.
Okay.
It very much so happened.
Okay.
Because it was a big scandal.
Yeah.
Well, imagine like a high family in the rankings of, regalness.
Yeah.
Having such a horrific crime occur, that's like a field day for opposing countries. So they made sure everybody knew about it. But Elizabeth Bathory became the poster child along with Vlad Tepes, who was the person who inspired Dracula.
Oh.
And they were kind of considered the reason for evil festering within the Roman Catholic community. They were the icons of it, essentially. They're like, this is what happens when you're Catholic. So, yeah. But on December 29th, 1610, Count Grigory Thurzo, who supervised judicial matters of Hungary, arrived at the castle to examine the countess's alleged violations against women of noble birth. Unfortunately, the abuse and torture of servants and, women who were of more peasant status in society, those crimes were never thoroughly investigated. They only did the ones from families that were higher rankings.
I see.
So, but he actually caught Bathory red-handed, quite literally, while she was in the middle of tormenting and torturing a young girl.
Oh.
Yeah.
So like he just walked in?
Yep, and she was in the middle of torturing someone.
Whoops.
And so Bathory was immediately arrested and imprisoned in her home while the committee went through her various crimes and made decisions of all that had transpired. Bathory's servants that assisted her...
You would think that it would be like a, like a pitchfork and mob type of deal.
You would think. But
like, you would think that if people's family members and daughters and all of that started disappearing in this town, that it would be like, everyone, let's overthrow the castle.
You would
think that it would be a big mob like strike.
I think people are afraid of the government, though. You have to remember that. It's like, it takes a lot, especially for people of lower statuses back in this time period, when they didn't have money to like risk, doing anything like that. So like it was very easy to suppress and oppress societies back in those times.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it just
you would think, though.
Yeah, I guess like if you were caught
trying to overthrow the government,
you're dead.
Yeah, exactly. So Bathory, while she was imprisoned in the house, her servants were immediately questioned, arrested, and tortured for their involvement. It was 3 women and 1 male that were assisting Bathory in these crimes. The servants refused their association in the murders, but they did confess to concealing multiple people.
Wow.
And so 2 of the women and the male servant were condemned to death, and one managed to escape imprisonment, and then another gentlewoman that had aided Bathory in occult rituals during her killings was found out and killed on the spot.
Ooh.
Yeah. So they took this very seriously.
I mean, I would too.
Yeah. Now, meanwhile, as a member of a regal family, kind of how I've said before, Elizabeth Bathory was condemned to death, or wasn't condemned to death, but she was put on trial. Regal families were above the law, unfortunately. Yeah. And so instead, she was just basically kept inside of this tower in the castle Katish, where she remained until she died in 1614.
Oh.
Yeah. But she even got a proper burial, too.
Yeah.
So she was originally buried in a tomb on her property, but her body was moved afterwards, and to this day, no one knows where it is.
Ooh.
Which is very interesting.
I wonder if the townsfolk did their thing then.
Maybe. It's very possible.
Yeah.
Desecrating a grave is a big thing.
They didn't think that was what she did was punishable by death.
How are they going to punish the highest person in the land? You know?
I don't know.
It's hard. It's hard to do. It really is.
I mean, you just think with the rest of the government, they should just.
She was the government practically. So.
Okay.
But anyway, so on to the haunting side of things.
All right.
So in the Castle Katish, many people believe that tormented souls still haunt the area. Some say they have sighted shadow figures and full-body apparitions in the different chambers, in the different rooms, hallways, things of that. And sometimes they appear as young girls crying.
What rooms?
They don't specify. There's not a lot. The Castle Katish is kind of... you can still visit it to this day, but they do...
Yeah, I want to go.
I want to go also. But, yeah, it's kind of difficult to get information on their hauntings because they don't actively publicize the hauntings that occurred there because I think they're ashamed of the history.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But it is haunted. People, these are all things that I have read from people who have been there. And this is what they saw. And they've done, Ghost Adventures, I know, went there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But, Zach Baggins, he's going to just scream at Elizabeth Bathory and be like, cut me open. So it's... so...
Goodness gracious.
But yeah.
Wow. I would like to think that she still haunts that place because she'd be a really malevolent haunting.
So here's the thing is people believe that they have seen Elizabeth Bathory still on the property, which is quite possible even if it's just in the residual form. But the people that have seen her said that they sometimes describe her as being faceless, which is interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think that might be because she's losing form?
I don't know.
Well, that's what Chris said.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. That's usually how shadow people are formed, which would make sense why, the women who were tortured there and killed there, why they would be shadow people, because we don't know their identities. But people know Elizabeth Bathory. People go there specifically looking to see Elizabeth Bathory. It's very unlikely that she's going to be the spirit to lose form. It's kind of in that way of Alice Riley. Alice Riley is never going to lose form in Savannah.
I see.
Because we're constantly talking about her.
Yeah, we're constantly talking about her, constantly zapping her up.
Well, in a way. But yeah, so I think it could just be maybe something that occurred in the years where she was in imprisonment, or even maybe with the burial practices. With her grave being dug up and her body being removed, maybe that has affected her spirit of some sort. But nobody's reported, having any kind of attacks of sorts where she's charging people, leaving bruises, leaving scratches. She's not a demon. She was a demon in her lifetime, I would definitely say.
Oh, yeah.
But I think her spirit, if it is anything, it is a residual haunting of Elizabeth Bathory because you can't commit this many heinous crimes without leaving some type of an impression on that building.
So you don't think it'd be intelligent? You don't think that it's her coming up and making choices to hurt people, scratch people?
Nobody's reported that at least.
Yeah, I mean, if she was, let's be real, if she was haunting that if she was haunting that castle as an intelligent haunting, she'd be torturing people.
Oh, absolutely.
She would be trying to continue that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I think it's a residual haunting of her if they see anything. But it is very likely that they are seeing Elizabeth Bathory in some form.
Sure.
In addition to the ghostly apparitions, people have said that they have heard disembodied voices in and around the castle. So it's basically, what it seems like to me is that there is a lot of residual energy going on inside of this castle from the hundreds of women that were murdered there, because we've talked about this many times where, you know, if you die in a traumatic way, a lot of times that's the best way to make a residual haunting, because it leaves an intense impression.
But I have a question. All right.
Yeah.
So from what I've learned about residual hauntings, they are kind of like how you said, like an impression left in the area where things happened. Would that residual haunting be her torturing somebody like over and over again?
No, so they're not intelligent. It's basically...
Well, that's not what I mean. Like,
no,
is it like a cycle?
No, so like what I'm saying is like the spirits of those residual hauntings are not continuously being tortured for eternity. It's essentially like when you hear disembodied voices screaming and things like that, imagine you're playing a record on a loop. It's basically just listening to what happened. It's not that they're there. And the way I always describe the residual hauntings is that it's like a snake shed. So the snake is not there, but you're seeing what was left behind by the snake. And that's all you have. So basically, when we see residual hauntings, they're just going about whatever happened that in that time that left the residual haunting, but it's not affecting that spirit at all.
I see.
So even though it might be frightening because you're hearing women's voices being tortured, it's basically this equivalent of listening if somebody recorded somebody, like the voice of someone getting tortured, and then you just listen to it 20 years later or whatever.
Sure. No, I understand that. I understand that.
So it's definitely haunted, for sure. Definitely worth visiting. I think the history is more gruesome than the hauntings, though, in this case, which honestly is great. I'm glad Elizabeth Bathory has moved on to wherever she has moved on to. Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, not everybody believes in hell that listens to our podcast, so I do like to leave it open-ended to whatever you want to believe, wherever she went. But she got what she deserved. I'm almost certain of it. So, you know, you can't commit that many atrocities in your lifetime and not
She burning.
Okay.
She burning.
Gracious. We can go into that a whole other episode. Yeah, sure.
She deserves it, dude.
No, her soul is definitely being tormented in some fashion, depending on whatever happens on the other side. But yeah, she's getting hers in the afterlife.
Oh yeah.
I'm glad that she's not sticking. Honestly, I very rarely am glad that a place isn't haunted, but she's definitely one of the spirits that I'm like, I'm glad you're not sticking around.
Oh yeah.
Because there is nobody wants to encounter somebody that's that horrific.
Yeah.
It would be
unless it's Zach Baggins asking her to cut him open.
Bruh.
So he's like, please.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, it would be like,
or the BuzzFeed guys drawing a pentagram in the castle.
Oh God.
I'm not talking, crap. I'm fine with all those people.
Yeah, it's just funny.
It's just funny.
But yeah, so it would be in the same way that I am glad that Ted Bundy's not sticking around,
You don't say.
Well, in like the afterlife where he could continue hurting people as an intelligent spirit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's like the I swear we always bring up Bloody Mackenzie.
Well, because
whenever we're doing this, we bring up Bloody Mackenzie.
Thus far, he has been our most malevolent spirit that we have talked about.
I know. Go to Edinburgh. It's great. Every single episode, I'm gonna say it. Edinburgh is awesome.
Yes.
If you're listening from Edinburgh,
I'm jealous.
I'm super jealous.
Yeah.
But anyway, but it's weird because like I love Bloody Mackenzie. I do. I'm super fascinated. I want to go back to Edinburgh, and I want to like go to his gravesite again, and like,
which we will.
Low key want to get scratched. However, I'm like, scratch me.
No, okay, chill out, Zach Baggins. Anyways,
but anyway, but like Ted Bundy, if he was an intelligent haunting, like left eye, I'd be like, no,
yeah,
no.
Well,
it's true.
Exactly.
I don't know what it is.
Exactly. And
like,
I mean,
they both were heinous people.
Well, Bloody Mackenzie was a super heinous.
I know.
Yeah, but he's actually a great example comparing to, Elizabeth Bathory, because they were both so heinous so long ago.
Yeah.
But Bloody Mackenzie is so heinous still to this day. He is still torturing people in a way, even in the afterlife. And so he did, all his murders were almost indirect. He wasn't there actually slaying people. So I can only imagine if Elizabeth Bathory was hanging around as a poltergeist, what she'd be doing, So it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
For sure.
So, because she was just beyond repair, honestly.
Yeah. I'm gonna upload Bloody Mackenzie to the most haunted city on earth.
Yeah.
So
it's a great episode.
Yeah, because I wasn't planning on taking those other ones, and maybe I'll release them later on, like on our 1 year anniversary of the show and all of that, because it's on another page on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all that for the From One to Wicked podcast. But I kind of want to move that one specifically over because I feel like that one was so good, and and again,
he
is
gave
like
him like a 9 or
he got a 9. He got a 9.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure. But anyway, so I think it's time to rate this
Blood
lady,
Countess.
the Blood Countess.
Jay, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. All right. So for me, when we when we do this type of episode, this From One to Wicked type of episode on this podcast, I kind of open up my ideologies when about how to rate these things, because if I'm rating her as solely a haunting, like an afterlife haunting, she's going to be low.
It's weak.
It's going to be weak. It's going to be if you ever owned a guinea pig, it's going to be weak. You'll know that if you just Google guinea pig weeks, and you'll have a great time. Anyway, but if I'm gonna rate her as a hot, just that, it's gonna be a 2.
Oh yeah,
for me,
absolutely.
However, I would like to take into consideration the hauntings that she has provided people even after her life in memories. The families of those people, who lived past her, they were so close to the people that were murdered, and they know what she did after she was arrested or after she died, and so they can only imagine what happened to them in their life, or their torture story, I guess. So I think that is a way to haunt, and then the actual victims, them being haunted at the time of torture and murder, I think that can be also taken into consideration. Therefore, I'll take her afterlife haunting from a 2, and I will give her a middle ground 5.
I completely agree with that, because I was struggling with this one. Because if you're going off of just historically how awful of a human being she's like up there with Bloody Mackenzie, if not more. But, I completely agree. I think a 5 is a very fair assessment, just because you can't negate what she did in her life. That's always going to leave an impression, even on how haunting it is to read about it in history. It's frightening. And I personally, if I encountered her in the 1600s, I would have been very scared of her.
Yeah. Well, she probably would have killed you.
Yeah. I would have been killed by Elizabeth Bathory and the witch trials.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think it's fair to give her a 5. I completely agree with you.
Okay. Well, cool. This was a good episode.
Yeah.
I like that. The next episode is on
Popobawa,
Popobawa,
which is a Tanzanian spirit, very similar to what we have here in the South called the hag from the Gullah Geechee people, which you guys have heard us talk about a little bit, but I'm very excited to go into it.
Yes.
So definitely join us for the next episode. You will not want to miss it. It is a very frightening spirit. I was jaw dropped when I was reading about this spirit. So definitely check that out.
Cool.
If you don't already follow us on TikTok, make sure to follow us over there at the Savannah Underground.
And if you'd like to hear about the Popobawa right now, I almost guarantee you, no, I do guarantee you, it's up on
Patreon. Yeah, so if you haven't been considering to become a patron, definitely consider it. And if you've been on the fence, what's keeping you back?
Yeah.
You know, so definitely check us out over there on patreon.com/Savannah Underground. But with that being said, my name is Madison Timmons.
And I'm JT Timmons.
And stay spooky, y'all.